Hi everyone, and welcome to week 14 of our Sweet Childhood Memories Sew Along, hosted by Pat Sloan at her website ilovetomakequilts.com. This week in this video I am actually making a different block than will appear in my quilt, as when I originally made this block, this one right here, I forgot to hit record on both of my cameras, so I re-recorded this tutorial using the same blues and grey fabric as I did the last one. So if you haven't done so already, jump over to Pat's website, download this week's free pattern, come back here, and I'll show you how to do it. So what you see on the board in front of me here is I have made a change once again, as I'm known to do, and instead of making the 16 half square triangles, which would have needed the 8 squares of both of the colours, I am going to do 2 lots of 4 at a time flying geese. I'm doing this for several reasons. One is to reduce the amount of seams that I have, and if your background or light fabric is actually a feature fabric with a print, by not having those seams there, you could possibly include part of the image rather than having it all chopped up. You could also do 2 lots of 8 at a time half square triangles to make sure that you have the 16, but as I said, I'm going with the 2 lots of 4 at a time flying geese. What I was just showing you there was that I've had to use my choco marker in this instance to mark my darker fabric, and in this instance our large square for the flying geese, which is the background or the light fabric, is 5 3/4 inches, and each of our smaller squares, we need 8 of those, is 3 1/4 inches. We then take those smaller squares and draw a diagonal line from corner to corner in one direction, and we place them diagonally across the large square, making sure that we maintain a straight line across. We then take that to the machine and we sew 1/4 inch on each side of our drawn line. With our stitching now complete on either side of our drawn line, we just need to give these a quick press to set those stitches. Don't do this if you use a heat erase pen. And then we will cut these in half along our drawn line. I just prefer to do this initial setting of the seam because it helps to flatten the fabric back out from any tension that was caused by our stitching. And then, as I said, we will cut these in half along our drawn line, and then we will press all of our dark blue fabrics, in my instance, up, and the shape will resemble a love heart. Now we need to take our remaining dark blue squares, in my instance, and place these diagonally once again to the other corner that's left here, pinning those in place to secure them and taking them to the machine and sewing 1/4 inch on each side of our drawn line. Back over at our cutting mat now, and we just need to give these a quick press first for the same reasons I talked about prior before. Once again, cutting these in half along our drawn line and then pressing our pieces out. We will then come to trimming these down. As you would know from watching any of my back catalogue of videos, my favourite way to trim down my flying geese is by using the Creative Grids Ultimate Flying Geese tool. On this tool there is a reference chart on the top left hand side, and that tells you what sizes you need to cut for the finished size flying geese you're aiming for. It also gives you a alphanumeric reference to line up for doing your trimming. So in this instance we need to line it up on the D, and we put the little shape inside the peak of our piece, and then we trim two sides. We then rotate both the block and the tool, and we use that same reference mark of D and line that up around the outside and inside the peak and trim our final two sides, and you'll have a perfect flying geese every time. You can use a standard quilting ruler to trim these down as well, and that's what I'm going to show you here now. So I'm grabbing my trusty 6.5 inch square, and what we need to do is, we know that the finished width of this is 4.5 and the finished height is 2.5. But to start with, what we need to do is find the 2.25 mark, which is half of our 4.5 inches. We need to line that up in the middle of our peak. We also need to make sure that we have 1/4 of an inch above that peak, and then we can take a reference from that bottom to make sure that we have it straight, as this is the original edge of the big square that we cut, so we know it's a great reference. We then rotate that around, and we can simply place our 4.5 and our 2.5 measurements on those cut sides, and in most instances you will also get your diagonal line from your ruler lining up perfectly with the other side. I'm just going to smush this a little bit and everything will come out in the wash. And that is how you do it if you only have a standard quilting ruler. Now we'll move on to framing our central block, and this is just a simple case of putting your two shorter pieces sashing on either side, and then putting the longer pieces on the top and the bottom as I'm showing you here. We'll just fast forward all this bit, and I'm going to press out towards the sashing pieces. Time now to construct our outer borders, and to do this, if you made all of the half square triangles, you would sew sets of 2 together and then 2 of those together to make sets of 4. If you're following along with me and you've made the 4 at a time flying geese, we just need to sew these in pairs of 2. Before doing this, however, because these are all pressed in the same direction, I am going to take one of them and give the seam allowance my world famous clip and press it in the opposite direction so that we have a nesting seam at that point and everything fits nice and snugly. Those all now sewn together to help control the bulk a little bit more. I will be pressing these seam allowances open. With those sets of 2 now made, we are ready to attach 1 to each side of our middle part that we constructed just before, and we also need to put our cornerstones on the top and the bottom row. So what you see me doing here is roughly setting the block out as it should be. I just need to make some space. I work in a very tiny area. And we will sew the 2 side sashings onto that center block, and then we will attach those cornerstones to the top and the bottom row. And we'll attach these in the same way as we did that middle sashing, by putting the shorter ones on the same sides and the top and the bottom on the same as well. With these, we will press towards the grey sashing on these side ones, and then when we put the top ones on, we can then nest those corner seams, and then we will also press towards the grey sashing. It is the path of least resistance and makes the most sense. Thanks for joining me again this week, folks, in the 14th block of our Sweet Childhood Memory Sew Along. If you haven't done so already, please like this video, share it with a friend, or consider subscribing to my channel if you haven't already done so. Most importantly, when you do subscribe, hit that little bell icon so you'll be notified of all my upcoming videos. I'll see you all again next week. Bye for now.